Welcome to Tilly's Trans Tuesdays. This week's topic is a big one and kind of the reason for everything. That's right, we're talking about everyone's least favorite thing, our not so friendly constant companion, gender dysphoria. Hi, I'm Tilly Bridges, your host, and I'm joined by my writing partner, my best friend, my wife, our token cis representation, my life preserver in an ocean of darkness, Susan Bridges.
Hello.
I'm the ocean of darkness.
No, because this is about dysphoria, see, and I have and you were...
Maybe you kept me afloat. I just feel like you're the life preserver that keeps popping up.
Well, okay. in every way except dysphoria. Okay. Our guest this week is Alex Iantaffi, an award-winning author, family therapist, WPATH certified gender specialist, certified sex therapist, somatic experiencing practitioner, and clinical supervisor. Alex is currently president of the Minnesota Association for Marriage and Family Therapy and past chair of the Trans and Queer Interest Network of the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. They have researched, presented, and published extensively on gender, disability, sexuality, relationships, and HIV. They are a transmasculine, non-binary, bi-queer, neurodivergent, disabled Italian immigrant who has been living on Dakota and Anishinaabe territories currently known as Minnesota since 2008. They are the author of Gender Trauma, Healing Cultural, Social, and Historical Gendered Trauma, which was awarded the Nautilus Award Gold category in 2022 and the AA Sect Book Award for Sexuality Professionals in 2023. They are the co-author of the books How to Understand Your Gender, A Practical Guide for Exploring Who You Are, Life Isn't Binary, Hell Yes, Self-Care, a Trauma-Informed Workbook, How to Understand Your Sexuality, a Practical Guide for Exploring Who You Are, and the upcoming How to Understand Your Relationships with Meg John Barker. They also host the Gender Stories podcast. Welcome, Alex.
Oh, thank you so much, Tilly and Susan, for having me on your wonderful podcast. Yes, it's a joyous thing to be here. Thank you.
You are involved in so much work surrounding gender and transness, and I was wondering if that was something you planned to do even before transition, or how did that all come about?
That is a great question. Well, I was always fascinated by gender, which now makes a lot of sense, given that I'm trans, right? But I always, right? Also makes a lot of sense now that I know I'm neurodivergent and go, oh, I remember going, ADHD, okay, I can see that. But autism, I was like, I have no special interest. And then at this moment, I'm like, humans are my special interest. People are endlessly fascinating, right? And how we work and doesn't always make sense to me, which makes, illuminates why I made some of my life choices. And so with gender, no, I had no idea I was trans when I did a whole PhD in what used to be called women's studies, which would now be called gender studies because I'm old. But this gender thing was always fascinating. I remember even being a little kid, and people would think I was a little boy because I really liked having short hair, and wearing like sweatpants. And I have a photo of me like where I look like a little boy when I'm like 6 or 7 years old, right? And so even before I had words to understand my own gender, I remember kind of just being really at ease. And actually, I really liked if people thought I was a boy, and I would just give a diminutive of my given name, which is actually Alex, which I have been going by Alex since I was like a little kid.
Yeah.
And definitely when I was a teenager and I saw Flashdance for the first time, because the main character is called Alex. And at the time, she was like the most gender bending, right? She's a welder, she's a dancer,
Yeah.
she's like, she wears the like sexy tuxedo thing and this is an 80s movie, but so we didn't have a lot of options back then. So it was the more, there's a lot more options now. My daughter is always like, if it's not queer, I don't even want to watch anything on any streaming services, right? And I was like, that's nice that you have that option. So Flashdance was probably the most queer, most gender bending character. I'm sorry, I know I'm going on a lot of side quests, and I was like, what was
That's
the original
okay.
question? But I'm like floating away on a side quest on gender at the moment. So I think even before I had words, I knew that this gender thing was very suspect. And it wasn't until much later in life that a lot of my moments I remember when people thought I was a boy, even as a teenager, I would have really short hair and people would address me as if I was a boy on the bus. And then I would turn around or speak and they'd be like, oh, sorry. And I was like, no, it's great. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized, I was like, oh, teen girls don't usually love being mistaken for a boy.
Yeah,
Like
generally.
right? Generally, that is not how most
Yeah.
kind of girls in air quotes would feel, right? And so I think it took me some time to understand that I was trans. And interestingly, I did come through it, keep being fascinated by gender, being brought up by an aunt who was very much a second wave feminist. And so very much around challenging the patriarchy, and owning my own power as a woman, because that's what I was told I was growing up.
Sure.
Even when and eventually, when I started kind of meeting trans folks and genderqueer folks, I was like, oh, like there was this draw, but I couldn't quite understand it at the beginning.
Yeah.
And this might sound silly, but even, because at the beginning I was like, well, I don't want to like be a man. That is not what I want as a non-binary. I'm a trans masculine non-binary person. So
right.
I was like, so I don't think I'm trans. Maybe it's just some internalized misogyny that I'm dealing with, right? Lots of work on internalized misogyny.
It is hard to figure all that out.
It is. It's not
it takes
straightforward.
time. It's not an overnight thing.
It's really not an overnight thing. I think it's so much easier now in some ways for young people because there's a language, there's like the internet, right?
Right.
When I was a child, there was no internet. And so it took me time to understand who I was and where I was coming from. And I came through it from this much more intellectual, academic perspective in a way.
Sure.
But even when I met my first genderqueer folks, they were all very like skinny, at that point I moved to England. They were all very English, very skinny, no curves. And that's not what my body was like and is like. And so I was like, well, I couldn't be that because I'm not androgynous. I have all these curves. That is not my body. And I know it sounds even silly to say that now, but when you don't have any other representation around you at the time, we need to see ourselves, I think, as humans to find ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
We need language. We need to feel mirrored. And there wasn't a lot of that. So it kind of took me into my early 30s to finally, and I was already out as queer, but it took me until my early 30s to be like, oh, I am trans and I am this version of trans. I'm like trans masculine. And actually, it's through my transition that then I came to this more gender expansive queer masculinity, queer non-binary masculinity, for want of a better word. I don't even know that there is the right word, if that makes sense, but that's probably the closest. That's a really long answer to your question. Sorry.
But that's okay. These things are complicated and it takes a lot of work to explain them, as people who are listening will find out through this episode, because talking about dysphoria is very difficult. But before we get there, I wanted to ask you, what has been the best thing about transitioning for you?
The list is so long,
Yeah, it is.
When people are like, is it worth it? I'm like, yes, it changed my life for the better. Just the level of ease that I have with my body and the level of acceptance I have of my body. And don't get me wrong, I struggle a lot with body image, especially as somebody who's like aging and going through perimenopause for so many years at this point. Feels like this never-ending vortex. But, and also like being disabled and losing mobility and my weight changing, like, and dealing with internalized fat phobia. None of those things are easy, right? They intersect with each other.
Absolutely.
And I think that everything would be so much worse if I hadn't transitioned, quite frankly.
Sure.
Like, I think transitioning has given me a much more easeful relationship with myself, a much more easeful relationship with the world.
Yeah.
I feel much more authentic in my relationship. I think it's made me a better parent, a better therapist, a better friend, a better community member. And, one of the most joyous memories I have, I had my top surgery right before I was 40. So almost coming up to, 13 years ago, actually, last December. I had my top surgery, and I remember, my mom was really against it, and I'm Italian, and so what my mom thought was still really influential, even though I was 40. Other people were like, "So you're gonna be a man now?" And I'm like, "No, but I still want top surgery because I can't bind anymore. It's either binding or no binding," and I just could not imagine a world without binding, and binding was getting too stressful for my physical needs. And so afterwards, the first time I went swimming, the first time I went dancing, I love dancing. And I remember, and swimming, both of those activities. And the first time I was in a Zumba class, which I could still do at the time, and I shimmied with like my flat chest, it was like the freedom of being me.
Yeah.
And the freedom of embracing all of me in a way that felt right to me. It's like I still get tingles and shivers in my body when I think about that moment. It was such pure joy. Same with the first time I went swimming in my swimming trunks, like just the feeling of pure joy in my body, even though I still have issues with body image and accepting myself, or my first pride parade without a shirt on.
Yeah.
And with the awareness of all the privilege that entails, the misogyny in our culture, right? Like, and I'm not one of those trans dudes who's like gonna whip my shirt off at any opportunities, because I think it's really complicated, and I think it really sucks the way we police bodies based on gender, right? Like, I'm aware of all of that. And I just want to speak to that pure joy of feeling like this is the body I was always meant to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this feels me. And before it didn't feel me.
Exactly. I had the exact opposite experience of you, where you got that joy from losing the jiggle, and I got the joy from getting it the first time. Like, now I've just gotten to a point, like recently in the past few months, where like when I'm driving, if the car goes over a bump, there's a jiggle, and I get so excited because there was nothing there to do that before. So yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah, I know. I love the joke of like, in trans community, if we could just swap parts,
Just
wouldn't
swap
we be?
parts.
I
We'd
would
all be
love
so
that.
happy.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
those, yes. It's like my sci-fi fantasy that we can all swap parts. It's like definitely the best, because I'm like, I love that that's joyous for you. I remember it being
And I
so
love that it's joyous
stressful.
for you without it. It's so good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the flip side of that, then, what has been the worst or maybe most difficult part of transitioning for you?
Yeah, so I think some of the most challenging things have been, and some of those are kind of, I'd already navigated when coming out as queer in some ways, because, coming out to my family was really scary.
Yeah.
Especially being brought up Catholic, and I was really deep into Catholicism, like I believed. And I remember when I was trying to come out as queer in my 20s and really doing a lot of soul searching. And I was very lucky to have a priest who basically looked at me and said, even if the church is not ready for you, it doesn't mean you don't get to be who you are, or that God doesn't love you. So I'm sorry that the church is not ready for who you are. And you should totally just be yourself and be happy. And, that was great from Father James, even though my mom was like, what kind of priest is that would say that, right? Only an English Catholic priest would say that. An Italian priest would never say that, But so some of those things I'd already navigated, like the fear of telling my family, like it was nerve-wracking, the idea of losing everybody, right?
Yeah, sure.
But it kind of came up again when I came out as trans, right? In some ways, I'd already done a first coming out. And now I had to do, actually, I'd already done a couple of coming outs, first as queer, then as polyamorous, because I really didn't want to keep it hidden, especially as a parent.
Sure.
And then, coming out as trans in my early 30s, I was going, oh God, not again. Now I have to have all these conversations again,
Yeah.
and so that was challenging, especially because people didn't always understand, and people conflate
Yeah.
gender and sexuality.
They
And
do.
so a lot of people were asking me, are you getting a divorce now? And I was like, no, I'm bisexual.
That was one of the first questions I got from
a
your
lot of
mother,
people.
especially.
And I just want to say, Alex, my mother's side of the family, my great grandparents were both full Italians, so I get it.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
scary.
Italian culture is very rigid about a lot of things.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
and part of it is because of Catholicism, although my grandmother got thrown out of the church for marrying a non-Catholic. But anyway,
Yeah.
I mean, we could talk for a long time about this.
Oh my God. Yeah, we could do a whole episode on like Italians and gender, right?
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because it's also so original, right? But there's definitely, yeah. So yeah, I got asked if I was getting divorced, and I was like, no.
Yeah.
Also, I was like, we're only married because like legally that made sense as co-parents, but the whole institution of marriage is really problematic, in so many ways in its roots. And so partially was telling people, partially was just really just a shift of how people perceive you.
Yeah.
I felt that there were a lot of expectations of masculinity that people wanted to project on me, if we want to use that language, or that they expected of me that wasn't really me, if that makes sense. And so
absolutely.
And also there's intersections with disability there and other things, but there were all these expectations that people had of what I should be like, in air quotes, as a masculine person. And I didn't really want to, that's not who I am, simply not who I am. But so that was hard to navigate, and then at the moment, I think we're all living through it in terms of trans community, just the level of trans hate, the level of anti-trans legislation, and as a queer person, I'd already been like spat on and told I was going to hell, and like I'd already gone through that. So it's not shocking for me as an older queer person. I'd already heard I'd already been called a groomer, those things had already been told to me as a queer person. I think that I'm sad to see that some cisgender gay and lesbian folks seem to forget that the same tools that are being used against us as trans folks has also always been used against all of us as queer people. So that division within community, experiencing it in a different way. And then things that are a little bit more privileged, like I love to travel. I mean, some of it is out of necessity, like my family lives in a whole different country. And some of it is because I was an academic. So I was, traveling a lot. And I still really love to travel. And traveling while trans is a whole different ballgame. As I'm sure you know.
It's rough.
It's really rough. And then traveling while trans and disabled during a pandemic in the last year and a half when I started like traveling again, that's a whole other ball game too. So I think just navigating the world. And it's interesting as I'm talking with you, noticing how much is navigating cisgenderism and transphobia in the world, really. It's not that it was hard. Sure, there were some, inner feelings of like, my trans body is a bit of a compromise. I wish I was born with a different body sometime, Most of the challenges has really been navigating other people and culture and society and religion, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. It's the biggest, I think, hurdle is, it's like being trans isn't tough because you're trans. It's tough because of the way people treat you when you're trans.
Exactly.
That's the difficulty.
Yeah. And also, and it's not even just about, that for sure, 100%. And also all the gendered expectations that people have of each other, right? It's like people were approaching me very differently in community, even around dating, because of having a masculine presentation. I was like, but I haven't changed inside, so navigating that, I think that folks have certain expectations, right? If you're born a cis man, I think you can express a queer femininity in a way that doesn't invalidate your gender, But if you're a trans masculine person who is more effeminate, who is more of a queer masculine trans person, who mostly dates masculine folks, then I think that there is an erasure of our gender sometimes if we don't ascribe to certain masculine standards, right?
Yeah. I've seen the flip side of that in the trans feminine community too, where some trans women want to be butch, which is totally valid and fine, but they get treated like, well, then you're not really a trans woman, are you?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's terrible.
But if you're a cis woman and you're butch, then you're just butch, right? And
exactly.
I'm like, why does our sexuality or gender expression invalidates our gender identity, right? But it does in a way that doesn't happen for cis folks, I don't think. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Okay, so before we dive in, do you want to let people know where they can find you online if they'd like to look you up after?
Sure. People can find me on my website, alexiantaffi.com. So that's ALEXIANTAFFI.com. Or they can follow me on Instagram, xtaffi, XTAFFI, F for Freddy. Yeah, and would love to see you. And of course, they can listen to Gender Stories. I keep forgetting I have a podcast. And if you'd like to read my books, you can get my books wherever you get books, which is hopefully your independent bookstore.
That's right. Support your independent bookstores.
Yeah. And if you don't live near an independent bookstore, you can go to bookshop.org.
That's right. Okay, so gender dysphoria. It is remarkably difficult to talk about. Finding the right words to express it is beyond difficult, and I'm a damned writer. I've been trying to describe it in words for years, and it's still a challenge. But very broadly, it means your gender does not match the one you were assigned at birth. There is so much more to it than that, but I want you to have that base to start from. Somebody looked at your genitals and in 2 seconds laid out a lifetime of expectations for you. And there's no easy way to explain to a cis person what it's like because it affects everyone in entirely different ways. I'm going to try to explain what it was like for me personally because that's the best that I can give you. What made my dysphoria spike more than anything was my face and how much it didn't look like me. At all. My face, and still to a strong but lesser extent, lack of breasts and feminine body shape were huge issues for me. Facial hair, and to a moderately lesser extent body hair, were also problems. See the Trans Tuesday on body hair for more on that particular problem at tillystranstuesdays.com. Facial hair especially drives me mad. I want to sand it off my face forever. And there are medical procedures that can address this, laser hair removal and electrolysis. But despite what capitalism wants you to believe, COVID-19 is actually still around. My lovely wife here is immunocompromised, so me being maskless indoors with strangers in a place with a lot of people just isn't possible. For more on the difficulties that trans people face with regard to COVID, see the Trans Tuesday on pandemic transition, also at tillystranstuesdays.com. I can't wear a mask while someone zaps every hair on my face. It takes multiple sessions to permanently get the hair to stop growing. One trans woman told me she'd had multiple laser sessions followed by 70 hours of electrolysis, and she still wasn't done. Well, guess what else spiked my dysphoria? Shaving my face, because in my head, it's another intrinsically male thing to do. So having facial hair spikes my dysphoria, shaving it off spiked my dysphoria. But very interestingly to me, as my transition progressed, this changed a little bit. By changing the shaving cream I use, by changing the motions of my hand and the way I shave, I was able to divorce it from what I did pre-transition. So the act of shaving no longer causes me dysphoria. In fact, it actually gives me euphoria because it's getting rid of the facial hair that doesn't belong in my body. Every morning, I'm removing parts of me that shouldn't be there so I can see the real me that's always been there. And Alex, I wanted to ask you if you have run into situations like this where something that caused you dysphoria, maybe that you even still have to deal with, but have found a way to make it not so bad.
Absolutely. That is such a great question because I think dysphoria is such a ever-shifting landscape in some ways, right? And I think for me, curves definitely gave me a lot of dysphoria, which is why I started to bind in, 20 years ago now, over 20 years ago, actually now. I started to bind initially. But one thing that really reclaimed is actually which seems weird, but body-wise, it's been my butt, which I hope is still PG-13 to talk
it's
about.
It's totally fine to talk about butts.
But I think that for me, it's been really a joy to reclaim it as part of who I am and part of my ethnicity. Not every ethnicity, not men, men don't automatically have flat butts, basically, right? And it's like, I come from Sicily specifically. There are plenty of men with bubble butts in Sicily, just like there are many men with bubble butts in other ethnicities too. And so for me, it's been really like not just reclaiming that as like, that can totally be part of masculinity. It can be totally be part of me. And then the other piece is more about gender expression. I think I have a lot of mixed feelings about testosterone. I've been on and off it a couple of times. I'm on it again now to deal with perimenopause. But appearing more masculine makes me more comfortable wearing what the world might perceive as more feminine clothing, or it makes me more comfortable expressing myself in this more animated, effeminate, in air quotes, way in terms of how people perceive it, because it's not an automatic, you must be a woman. Because if my voice deepens and I have facial hair, then people are like, what is happening? They tend to read that as queer, which is who I am. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I ran into something similar where pre-transition, even before I knew I was trans, I was always trying to hide my body in really baggy clothes, right? Because I didn't want to see it. It gave me dysphoria. And so early on in transition, I couldn't wear anything baggy because it reminded me of that. And I felt people will see me as a man and not a woman. So I need you to see the curves that I'm developing. And then like 2.5 years in, I hit a point where I could wear those baggy things again. And it didn't bother me because I felt, being long enough on hormone replacement therapy, I felt feminine enough that I could put those back on again and not feel like I would look like a man. So I absolutely get that. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's such a joy in that, because it's like, I have a lot of my close folks who are like radical fairies and, a lot of queer man community. And so I'm like, oh, I can be more expansive, and I can mix and match my clothing, which I really love doing, and be colorful and all those things that unfortunately our culture just makes everybody so much smaller, so much more drab. Yes, it's just so much more expansive. You know what I mean?
I do, absolutely. Early on in my transition, my face was really sensitive and I couldn't shave that often. It took me months to work up to being able to shave every other day. And do you realize what that meant? I got maybe an 8-hour span, 3 days a week, where I could feel like me. And the rest of the time I just didn't. And replacing my wardrobe took a long time and a lot of money, which I talked about in the Trans Tuesday on privilege, time, and money, which was episode 32 of this show. And that was further exacerbated on how it just takes a lot of time and experimentation to find out what you actually want to wear and feel good in. See the Trans Tuesday on finding our trans style for more on that, which was episode 33 of this show. But even as I got more women's clothes, I couldn't wear them every day, even if I had enough of them to do so. Why? Well, even if I was just in women's jeans and a lady-style t-shirt, if I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror like that with stubble on my face, dysphoria spike. If I feel the stubble on my face, dysphoria spike. And what if I had to take out the trash or get the mail or step out of our apartment for any reason? The world was literally going to see a bearded lady, and I had to decide if I had the energy in me to fend off any potential harassment that might come my way. And I want to take a minute to note there is absolutely nothing wrong with bearded ladies. Women can be as hairy or hairless as they like. But society says they should only be one way, and doing anything outside of that opens you up to harassment. And screw those bigots, I don't care what they think. But I still had to have the mental and emotional capacity to deal with it if I risked going outside with stubble. So the end result is I spent the days I couldn't shave in old boy-cut t-shirts and jeans or shorts, the gender-neutral way I dressed all my life until recently. And to be clear, gender-neutral clothes are right for some people, and that is also totally fine. But it was not right for me specifically, yet I felt, I was forced to do it most of the time back then, which caused, you guessed it, dysphoria spike. And that's called boymoding or girlmoding for those of you listening, and you bet there's a Trans Tuesday on that too at the website. And how much more painful it became to do that as transition progressed. So that's just a small glimpse of some of the things I was dealing with early in my transition and for all of my life pre-transition. That's not all there is to it, but that was the easiest example I could show you of how it crops up everywhere and causes all kinds of problems. Alex, did you experience this same thing where dysphoria seemed to be coming at you from all sides and caused by just all kinds of different things that compounded on each other?
Absolutely. I feel some days it still does, in some
Yeah,
ways.
absolutely.
It's like I was saying out my complicated relationship with testosterone, right? And like
Yes.
even
Yeah.
I had to talk to one of my partners and be like, I know that you're trying to be affirming, but when you're like, I see more hair on your face, I'm like, I have complex feelings about this. Like I have
Sure.
complex feelings about body modification. And I have like it seems so complicated. I think there is an aspect as a non-binary person also of how do you express your gender fluidity in a way
Yeah.
that feels in integrity with how you feel inside. In an ideal world, I would love if there was, if I could like switch things on and off in my body,
Yeah.
in some ways. But unfortunately, humans don't work that way at all.
We're poorly designed.
Right? We are poorly designed. I feel like
Yeah.
there could be some improvement, like human 2.0
Absolutely.
could be more
Yes.
gender fluid, and we could have some more options here. But I think some of that is so true. And there are moments when I remember becoming much more isolated because nothing felt right. It felt like there was
Yeah.
nothing I could put on my body that would accurately express to the outside world who I was, right?
Yeah.
Or there were times when I would get misgendered and I'm like, oh, how much energy do I have to engage in this interaction? Do I want to
Yeah.
correct this person? Do I not want to correct this person?
Yeah.
Right?
I have been there.
Which, like, we've all been there as trans folks, I feel, by and large. And so it just takes so much energy. And I think sometimes we really underestimate, if I put my had on, just the allostatic load, the level of stress on our nervous system that it
Yeah.
takes just to exist as trans in a world that doesn't make space for our identities and expression and has all this tight gender expectations. A lot of it feels like societal gender dysphoria,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And I really love Lucy Fielding's concept of gender pleasure, and just this idea of like, how do I find pleasure in who I am, my body as is, and the way I want to express my gender and, in whatever way on any given day. But then when we interface with the outside world, I think that's when the dysphoria really spike, or even just the anticipatory anxiety, like you said, right? What if I
Yeah.
run into somebody when I'm running down to the store and I'm not looking quite the way I want to look, right?
Right.
But it's wonderful to find things that also give us gender euphoria. For me, it's haircuts. Haircuts always give me gender euphoria. Going to the barber gives me gender euphoria. And I have the best trans barber. She's amazing. She's like a trans woman who owns a barber shop in Deep Cats in Duluth. Shout out to B,
That's very cool.
who's also an artist, and she's fab. And it not only feels gender affirming, and I've gotten haircuts by like cis gay male barbers, and that felt somewhat affirming. But there's something for me. One of the biggest joy is like T for T in every way, not just in terms of partnership, but also community. And
Sure.
so, we're there and we're chatting, and I'm getting this gender affirming haircut, and we're talking about how we're doing and transphobia and all those things. And it's just like such a moment of like not just gender euphoria in my body, but also like connection and community, which I've forgotten is also one of the biggest gifts I got from my
Yeah.
transition, is the community of trans folks and the siblinghood I feel with my fellow trans folks, in so many ways. That is beautiful.
It is. Yeah, and you're right, because there is something like with the dysphoria that can come from the way society treats you or the interactions that you have. When you have somebody like a trans hairdresser, you don't have to worry about that. And
Yes.
so your stress level drops, your dysphoria is going to drop because you're not worried they're going to, be transphobic toward you. So I absolutely get it. Yeah.
Exactly. Or even just slightly awkward. I was traveling
Yeah, yeah.
recently and I didn't get a chance to get a haircut, and I was in a very I was in a very gay place. And I walked
Okay.
into like, it was daddy's barber shop, and it was definitely very gay man led,
Yeah.
and I went in and I was like, oh, do you accept walk-ins? And they were like, for a haircut? And I was like, yes, it's a barber shop, right? And we had that awkward moment of looking at each other, and I was like, dear gods, like, am I getting now red in terms of my gender? Am I the first trans person that's walking into your shop? What is happening in this moment, right? And then we navigated and it was fine. And I had a great haircut. But I was tense in a way that I'm not tense with my barber, who just gets me and who knows who I am. And I know who she is. And we can shoot the crap while we're talking.
Yeah.
Keeping it PG-13 here.
Nice save. Thank you.
That's just, thank you. My nervous system just relaxes and I can enjoy it rather than, I still got a great haircut, but I was tense while I was getting it, even though the barber was great. But that moment, navigating that awkwardness, just set the scene. And that has happened so many times, right? That's just a recent example. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you cis folks who are listening can see how pervasive dysphoria is, because we get it from wearing the wrong clothing or being called by our dead names and people using the wrong pronouns and societal expectations and a million other things. But okay, what is gender dysphoria like? Here's where the language kind of fails us. I'm going to use several clunky and inadequate metaphors. Try to combine them all in your head and maybe it'll give you some idea that's in the right ballpark. Ready? Okay, buckle up. Here we go. It's like not being able to breathe, like there's a 400-pound weight on your chest slowly crushing the life out of you. No matter how you struggle, you can't get out from under it. No one will lift it off of you. No one else can even see it. You have to live your life under it. It's like being underwater, being able to see everyone else around you swimming while you're eternally drowning. And no one helps because no one knows. Worse, some of the people you love so much are the ones holding you underwater. Imagine you're at dinner with your friends and you see them, not with your eyes, but you see them as people. You love them. They think they see you, but they don't. They can't. You're buried behind a 6-foot-thick concrete wall that separates you from the world. Everywhere you go, every second of your life, crushing weight, lack of breath, nobody knows or sees the real you. You see a person in the mirror and in photos that you know is yourself because people tell you so, but it's not you. See the Trans Tuesday on Photos and Reflections at TillysTransTuesdays.com for more on the ways our very appearance betrays and wounds us. It's being buried somewhere deep inside a fleshy meat sack. You're steering around the world, piloting a robot you never asked for and don't know how to operate. And in most cases, the appearance and physical aspects of that robot repulse you. Have you ever found the right words to describe dysphoria for you, Alex? Or was yours anything like mine? Was it different? What was it like for you?
Yeah, that's another great question. It shifts and changes. There were definitely moments. I love that description of like that 400 pounds weight on your chest, right? That's really crushing. And then there've been so many other moments. I think for me, sometimes I describe it like, and I think that's because of my neurodivergence, but when there is like a buzzing from like overhead fluorescent lights or some appliance that has a low level buzzing, but it's there and you don't even know it's bothering you until it's not there. And you change environment and you're like, oh, my head feels so much clearer and my body feels so much more relaxed because there was, so sometimes some moments is definitely like the 400 pounds weight. Like, if I wanna, even recently I was traveling and I wanted to go to a spa and they asked to like pick the gender, when booking online. And I was like, yep, I'm not going anymore. Right. Those are the 400 pounds weight moments of like, oh, I just want to exist in this world and do things and just move with ease. But other times it is more like that constant like buzzing that's like sapping some life energy out of you and you don't even know it until it's gone and you feel at ease. And definitely that sense of like not being able to feel fully known because people don't really see you. I love when you talked about that. I remember even watching the Barbie movie and there's the Billie Eilish song, right? What was I made for? Like cry. And I've watched the Barbie movie like 3 times, but that's all other conversation. It's so good. I enjoyed it. I know that other folks have other feelings, but I loved it. And I have watched it 3 times. And every time I cry. And when I thought about that the last time, I was like, why does this really get to me? And I was like, because when, and no spoilers, but Barbie has been out for a long time. So there's a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't watched the movie. But that moment when she decides that she wants to be human, right?
Yeah.
And she's looking for permission, but she's told that she doesn't need anybody's permission, right? And there is this like, but do you understand what it means? You know, for me as a trans person, I remember that moment of finally understanding that I was trans, the fear, the looking for permission, you know, am I trans enough? That moment.
Yep.
And also just all the anguish before that moment, right? So for me, that Billie Eilish song, that moment in the Barbie movie, it's a very queer and trans moment for me. It's like, you know, even though the genders doesn't align, doesn't even matter, right? In some ways, but there is this feeling of like just all that grief, right? Of like, how long did it take for me to be myself? And how different life would have been like if I was living in a world where I could be seen and I could be embraced and nurtured and be myself from my childhood, from my teenage years. You know, I was myself, but up to a point.
Right.
Not fully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just want to say for the folks listening that Barbie, in fact, is a very, very trans movie. And I'm going to do a whole series of episodes about the trans allegory in Barbie, which is really strong. You're not even going to believe it. So stay tuned for that.
I can't wait.
Well, getting back to dysphoria, I want to say that it's not that I hate men, right? It's that I hated people thinking I was a man, because I'm not and I never have been. While developing, my physical body went one way and my brain and gender went another. It's a mismatch. And even just talking about it, I can feel that oppressive weight on my chest. So we do what we can to try to fix it. We change our clothes, our hair, our names. We try medical options, maybe like hormone replacement therapy and gender confirmation surgeries. Because living with dysphoria is painful, it's awful, it's literal torture. You do not understand the sheer body horror of watching yourself go through the wrong puberty and your body shifting and warping into a nightmare that you cannot escape. Okay, so Susan, I have a question for you as our token cis representation.
Oh, surprise twist.
Yes. Is it really hard for you to wrap your head around gender dysphoria? Or have you ever felt anything like similar to it when maybe someone thought or treated you like a gender you're not? Or
yeah, actually, I have had some experiences.
Talk about that a little.
Oh, boy.
I want to hear this.
All right. I had a haircut. Like, I can't remember exactly when this was. Probably high school-ish, where I had not quite accepted that I was queer.
Sure.
I just thought I liked girls and their clothes. I thought clothes were nice.
Yeah.
I never wore any of those clothes. I just admired them.
Sure.
It wasn't about the women. This is very natural.
Yes.
And I hung out with an openly gay guy all the time.
Yes.
But I got a haircut. It was... Do you remember when Sarah McLachlan had that super short haircut?
Yes, I do.
I got that haircut.
Okay.
And it was so short, it was a lot.
Yeah.
Like,
You were giving off strong lesbian vibes, is that what you're saying?
Not that exactly. It was just, I kind of looked like a boy.
Okay.
Like, it was really short.
And did that mess you up?
It did mess me up.
Yeah.
It freaked me out. And, like, my hair grows really fast, so it didn't take long to get cuter.
Yeah.
But at first, it was just like, oh my God. But then when I was in college, I had a lot of body issue stuff.
Sure.
Which I hate thinking about right now because I'm like, oh man, you looked so good. I was wearing like men's extra large t-shirts and I weighed much less than I do now. So it was like intense. And there were just accepting my own kind of queerness and accepting my body on top of that. Like it does. It all kind of interrelates in this weird way that does
society for you.
Feel very good.
Yeah. So I think you've maybe gotten a little taste of dysphoria.
I have. Yes.
Yeah. And, you know, for the cis folks listening, there's a chance you could experience small tastes of what it's like too. In our highly gendered society, women wearing men's clothing is largely seen as great and wonderful because men are so awesome and should be aspired to. But for the cis guys out there, have you ever worn a dress? How did that make you feel? Did your skin crawl? Could you just not wait to get it off of your body? Was it gross and uncomfortable and weird and awful? You just got a 0.0001% taste of gender dysphoria. And by the way, if it didn't feel weird and gross and awful, that's super cool. You may be a cis dude who likes skirts and dresses, which is a totally legit thing to be. But, you know, you might also not be cis. See the Trans Tuesday and how do you know if you're trans? For any cis people listening, a thought exercise. Seriously sit and imagine every day you must wear clothes for a gender that's not yours. You see someone of a different gender in the mirror. You know it's not you, but everyone else will act like it is. And everyone expects you to play that part and punishes you when you're bad at it. All the while you're dealing with just how terrible it makes you feel. Your pronouns are wrong, your name is wrong, your entire life is wrong. It's all day long. It's every day of your life for years and years and years and years. It never ever stops until you finally realize what's causing it. Imagine the relief you'd feel to know you're not the only one who experiences it. Imagine the relief you'd feel to know there are things you can do to correct it, to fix it, to not feel that misery anymore. And now imagine so many people not like you want to punish you for seeking the things that would fix it. Want to, and in some cases do, make getting that care illegal. Does that make you anxious? Does it make you panic? Does it make you feel like the walls are caving in and there's no way out? There's nothing you can do and no one who will help you? You are maybe starting to get it. I'm far enough into my transition now and have been lucky enough with the way my body has responded to hormone replacement therapy and in a few other ways to basically not have any dysphoria anymore, though seeing my stubble each morning still causes it. But to be clear, you do not have to have dysphoria to be transgender, but the vast majority of us do. But also, gender dysphoria has largely been described and decided on by a field of entirely cisgender doctors, which, yeah, is as messed up as you think. I'm personally of the opinion that the definition of gender dysphoria should be opened up wide, because we all experience it in different ways. It's caused by different things and at different intensities. So, like, if you ask me, someone who is assigned male at birth simply saying, I'd be happier as a girl, that's gender dysphoria to me, even if it doesn't come with all the anguish, because cis people don't feel that way.
And I just want to say really quick that it's like interesting because when you came out, that meant I came out.
As queer, right.
Which I hadn't before.
Because we were in a cishet appearing relationship.
Right. But I also felt like, now I'm a card carrying queer.
Sure.
So I can do more queer things, have different queer hair. I feel like there's expectations that go with queerness as well.
Yeah.
Even if you're cisgender.
Right. Well, yeah. Alex, you're really deep into the field of this stuff. So I wanted to ask you, do you think what qualifies as gender dysphoria right now is too narrow of a definition? And do you think maybe expanding that to include things like simply thinking you'd be happier as a different gender help be beneficial?
100%. I'm very excited about some of the changes that are happening in our field.
Yeah.
I mean, I was already a therapist when it was still like a disorder, right? Gender identity disorder, not even gender dysphoria. And it was like, not only was it incredibly pathologizing, and there's a lot to be said about how our field is so rooted in pathology generally, but also I think that is so limiting. When I think about the little person that I was talking about at the beginning, my first experiences were not of dysphoria. They were of gender pleasure, gender joy. I mean, with this haircut and this clothes, I feel comfortable and people see me. That's gender joy, right? And so I love that in our field, we're moving towards gender incongruence, and that's in the ICD-11, which is what the rest of the world mostly uses rather than the DSM. So the International Classification of Diseases, which is still a little problematic, but it's what the World Health Organization uses, is been taken out of mental health. It's just under the bigger umbrella of sexual health, like pregnancy. It's not a disease, but we still need to have some treatment, right? And so I love this idea of gender incongruence. You're just not the gender that was assigned to your birth. And you might know that gender incongruence through gender pleasure or gender joy if you're in an accepting family and environment, and not through the dysphoria lens. I think that the dysphoria lens really stresses that cis people have decided for us what the criteria should be, right? And a lot of that dysphoria comes from the pervasive cisgenderism. So the ideology that a baseline humans are naturally, in air quotes, cisgender, which is really problematic.
It sure is.
I don't want to go too deep, but basically, yes, I think the gender dysphoria, we experience it. It's a useful concept to have, but it's also a concept that has been given to us. It's a legacy of pathologization. It's a legacy of living in a colonized world where we've erased the expansiveness of gender and sexualities, right? Living in a colonized world, white supremacist, patriarchal world. And so I think that as we move away from those systems of oppression, I'm hoping that we're moving more towards this place where it's like just part of who you are, and people will experience less dysphoria as part of that, and more gender joy and the gender pleasure by being themselves. Which doesn't mean trans people go away. It means that we were always here. We've always been here, and we don't have to feel bad about it. It was almost like we had to perform pain for therapists before.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's almost like we had to suffer enough to get access to medical treatment, and that is messed up. And I don't think we should have to suffer. Like, just to want more pleasure and joy and expansiveness and ease in our body should be enough. We shouldn't have to give our pain as the price we pay, right? And there's so much other prices that societies wanted us to pay to be trans and wants us to pay. And I think that's not necessary.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to talk a whole lot more about that next week, people listening. So come back, because you don't want to miss that discussion.
But I do want to say that touches on the thing we've said before, where like so many people think that, you know, pushing your LGBTQ-ness onto other people and stuff, when really the cisgender binary is the thing that is relentlessly pushed on everyone. That is in fact the ideology, like in society. That is just every single facet of society tells you this is how you're supposed to be.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I want to leave you with one final description of gender dysphoria that I surprised myself with. If you follow me on any of my social media accounts, you know I post daily pre-coffee thoughts as I sit around waiting for the caffeine to kick in. Many are goofy or ludicrous, some are poignant, some are sad, some are just bad puns. I don't plan them, I just go wherever my nonstop brain takes me that morning. And a little while back, I was just thinking about dysphoria one morning. I wasn't lost in it. I wasn't even feeling it. Again, I'm incredibly lucky in that my life is almost entirely dysphoria-free now. But I had dysphoria my entire life, and it was really, really bad. And I'll never, ever be able to forget how it felt, no matter how I try. And so this poem about it just came out. And afterward, I realized it may be the most accurate description of my gender dysphoria I've ever managed to put into words. So here it is. Cries from Stygian depths, clawing, scraping, form without shaping, reverberating off bone, amplified by beating sinew, pleading for you to see a light brighter than a galaxy of suns, screaming, set me free. Thanks for being here, Alex.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so wonderful to have this conversation with you both.
Cis folks, please understand what so many of us go through. Transitioning isn't a whim, it isn't elective, it isn't even really a choice. For so many of us, it comes down to try to be free or spend life trapped in a waking death. Tilly Bridges, end transmission. Tilly's Trans Tuesdays is hosted by Tilly Bridges and Susan Bridges, with audio editing and sound mixing by Jillian Morgan. The Google Doc and social media versions of this week's topic and all past topics are available at tilliestrainstuesdays.com. Special thanks to Daisy and Jane for the use of Sorry Not Sorry as our show's theme music. Please stop by and show your support at daisyandjane.bandcamp.com and soundcloud.com/daisyandjane. You can find me at Tilly Bridges on Blue Sky, Twitter, and Hive, on Mastodon at tillybridges@mastodon.social, at facebook.com/TillySBridges, and on Insta and Threads at HeckYeahTillyBridges. And you can find Susan on most of those at Susan L. Bridges. You can find Jillian at Audio Jillian on Blue Sky. You can join the Tillyverse Discord server by following the link at the very bottom of Tillie'sTransTuesdays.com. We hold regular watch parties for the Matrix films and other trans movies, where I do a live Q&A, and it's blossomed into a wonderfully supportive, compassionate, kind community of friends. We'd love to have you join us. For more information, visit pendantaudio.com. Thanks for listening.